It sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? A Netflix subscription. A $15.99 monthly charge. But that's where it started, the tiny crack that split the foundation of my 10-year marriage to Ben. We were the couple people pointed to. Stable, successful, a perfect team. He was a financial analyst, meticulous and calm. I ran a small boutique marketing firm, creative and driven. We lived in a beautiful, minimalist townhouse where everything had its place, including our emotions. We didn't fight, we discussed. We didn't have problems, we had challenges to optimize. The Netflix thing was trivial. It was my account from before we were married. I'd always paid for it. One Saturday, Ben was doing his monthly financial review, a sacred ritual, and he called me into his office. "Anna," he said, turning his monitor toward me. "I'm streamlining our recurring charges. I see you're still paying for Netflix on your old card. I've added it to the joint household account bill. It's more efficient." I felt a flicker of irritation. It was my account. My little independent pre-him thing. "I don't mind paying for it," I said lightly. "It's my silly habit." "But it's not logical," he replied with a patient smile. "We're a household. Household expenses should be consolidated. It's about the system." He said the system the way other people might say the gospel. The flicker grew. "It's $15, Ben. It's not a system breach. It's my credit card points." His smile tightened. "It's the principle. We agreed on a joint financial framework. This is an outlier. Outliers create inefficiency." He'd already made the change. The discussion, as always, was just him informing me of the optimized solution. I stood there looking at his neat spreadsheet, every line item a testament to control. I wanted to argue, to say, "It's my Netflix." But that sounded childish even to me, so I did what I always did. I swallowed the flicker. I nodded. "Okay, you're right, more efficient." "Good," he said, turning back to his screen, the matter settled. But as I walked out, something settled in me too, a small, cold stone of resentment. He hadn't just moved a subscription. He'd absorbed the last tiny piece of my individual financial life into his perfect, logical system. That night, we watched a documentary he'd chosen. I stared at the screen, and for the first time, the quiet in our beautiful living room didn't feel peaceful. It felt sterile. I was paying for half of this documentary with the joint account, I thought, and the pettiness of the thought shocked me. The crack had been made. The cold stone of resentment didn't vanish. It sat there, small but solid, and it made me notice other things. A week later, I bought a vibrant, abstract painting from a local street fair. I loved its chaos of color. When I hung it in our hallway, Ben studied it for a long moment. "It's very energetic," he said finally. "Does it clash with the aesthetic? We agreed on a neutral palette for shared spaces." He wasn't angry, just puzzled, as if I'd suddenly started speaking a different language. The painting came down. I put it in my office upstairs, a room he called your domain. Then it was the coffee. For 10 years, we'd drunk the same medium roast, fair trade blend. One morning, on a whim, I bought a bag of dark, smoky French roast. The smell filled the kitchen. Ben took one sip from his mug and frowned. "This is different. Did they not have our usual?" "I wanted to try something new," I said, trying to keep my voice light. "It's very bitter," he said, putting the mug down. "I'll make a new pot with the usual." And he did, dumping the French roast I just brewed down the drain without a second thought. He wasn't being cruel. He was being efficient. Why tolerate a suboptimal coffee when the correct one was available? He couldn't comprehend that the suboptimal coffee was, to me, an experiment, a tiny rebellion, a breath of different air. We stopped having sex. Not abruptly, but it faded like a forgotten app subscription. It wasn't efficient. It was messy, unpredictable, time-consuming. Our calendar was too full of optimized blocks for work, fitness, and meal prepping. We'd become a perfectly managed joint venture, and intimacy was a liability. The Netflix crack began to spread into other, deeper fissures. I found myself talking less, my opinions sanded down into smooth, inoffensive pebbles before I offered them. It was easier than facing his calm, logical dismantling of any idea that didn't fit the system. I started working later, claiming client demands, but really I was sitting in my office with the door closed, staring at my colorful, clashing painting, just breathing. The breaking point when it came was absurdly small. It was a Thursday. I'd had a terrible, chaotic day. A client had been a nightmare, the weather was awful, and I'd spilled coffee on my favorite white shirt. All I wanted was to order greasy Chinese food, the kind we never ordered because it wasn't nutrient-dense, and watch something stupid and funny. I scrolled through Netflix, looking for an old, silly sitcom. I couldn't find it. I went to the search bar. Nothing. I checked my list. It was gone. Our entire viewing history, the carefully curated mix of documentaries and prestige dramas, looked different. Lighter, emptier. "Ben," I called out. He was in his office, of course. "Did you do something to the Netflix profile?" He appeared in the doorway, looking pleased. "Oh, yes, I did a purge today. We had over 200 titles in my list. it was decision clutter. I archived anything we hadn't watched in the last 6 months or that had a rating below 80% on Rotten Tomatoes. Streamlining. He had deleted my list. My silly, comforting list of cheesy rom-coms and mindless action movies I'd saved for days exactly like this one. He had judged them by their scores and deleted them, without a thought, because they were inefficient. I looked at his proud, logical face, and the dam holding back 10 years of swallowed words, stifled opinions, and erased preferences finally broke. The stone of resentment wasn't cold anymore. It was a white-hot coal. You deleted my list? My voice was quiet, dangerously calm. Our list, he corrected gently, and I archived it. It was just digital clutter, Anna. It was my list. The words exploded out of me, a shout that echoed in our perfectly sound-engineered living room. You moved my subscription, you take down my paintings, you throw out my coffee, and now you delete the shows I like because they don't have a good enough score. What is next, Ben? Will you archive me because I'm not optimal enough? He stared at me, utterly bewildered. He didn't see a wife at the end of her rope. He saw a system error, a glitch in the logical framework. Anna, he said, his voice soothing and analytical, you're being highly emotional. This isn't about Netflix. Let's discuss this rationally. But I was done discussing. I was done being rational. I walked to the hallway, put on my coat, and walked out the door, leaving him standing there, confused by the inefficiency of my outburst. I drove to a cheap motel, the kind we would never stay in, and paid in cash. I ordered the greasiest Chinese food I could find and turned on the TV. I didn't watch Netflix. I watched whatever was on. It was glorious. It was mine. And I knew, as I fell asleep in the scratchy sheets, that I was never going back to his perfect, sterile system. My marriage was over, and it had been canceled by a man who thought he was just cleaning up a subscription list. I spent 3 days in the motel. Ben called 12 times. I sent each call to voicemail. His messages progressed from confusion, Anna, please, let's talk this out logically, to mild concern, this is an unnecessary expense. A motel? It's not in the budget. To a frustrated, cold efficiency, if you're intent on this performance, I need to know how long you intend to stay. I'll adjust the household budget accordingly. He didn't ask if I was okay. He adjusted a budget line. That was the final, chilling confirmation. On the 4th day, I drove to my office early. It was my sanctuary, the one space filled with my clashing art, my messy stacks of inspiration magazines, my dark roast coffee, and a chipped mug I loved. I called my older sister, Clara. I hadn't spoken to her in depth in months. Ben found her unstructured. I left Ben, I said, the words feeling both terrifying and exhilarating. There was a beat of silence. Then, thank God, what finally did it? Did he try to optimize your soul? I choked out a laugh that was also a sob. He deleted my Netflix list. Of course he did, she said, no trace of humor in her voice. That's not what this is about, Annie. That's just the receipt. The bill came due. What are you going to do? I don't know. I'm in a motel. Get out of the motel. Come here. Stay as long as you need. Clara lived 40 minutes away in a cozy, cluttered house that smelled of dogs and basil. It was the antithesis of my townhouse. I showed up with a single suitcase. She hugged me tight, no questions, and poured me a glass of wine at 11 a.m. You look like you haven't slept in a decade, she said. I stayed a week. I slept for 12 hours a night. I ate when I was hungry. I left dishes in the sink. I watched terrible reality TV at full volume. I cried, raging, heaving sobs that came from a place so deep inside me I didn't know it existed. Clara just listened. She didn't offer a logical framework. She just said, that sounds awful, and passed me another tissue. Ben finally showed up on day 8. He came to Clara's doorstep in a crisp shirt, holding his tablet like a shield. He looked out of place amid the wind chimes and overgrown flower pots. Anna, he said, ignoring Clara hovering behind me. This has gone on long enough. It's time to come home and resolve this. I've drafted a proposal for a more structured communication framework to prevent future misunderstandings. He actually tried to hand me the tablet. I didn't take it. I looked at the man I'd loved, shared a bed with, built a life with. I saw a stranger administering a relationship like a corporate merger. There's no misunderstanding, Ben, I said, my voice steady for the first time. I understand perfectly. You want a wife who fits seamlessly into your system. A component. I don't want to be a component anymore. I want to be a person. A messy, inefficient, coffee-spilling, bad TV-watching person. He blinked, his brow furrowed. Don't be reductive. Our marriage is a partnership. Systems enable harmony. It was a prison, the words burst out, but calmly this time. A beautiful, quiet, spotless prison. I'm filing for divorce. The word hung in the air between us. Divorce, the ultimate inefficiency. The system failure he could not optimize away. His face went pale, then tight with controlled anger. This is irrational, over a streaming service. You're throwing away 10 years over a list. No, I said quietly, finally making him see the crack that had brought down the whole wall. I'm reclaiming myself over 1,000 tiny erasures. Starting with the list. He left then, stiff-backed, holding his useless proposal. I closed the door and leaned against it. Clara put a hand on my shoulder. You okay? I took a deep, shuddering breath. The air in her cluttered hallway was thick with life and mess. I will be, I said, and for the first time I believed it. The legal process was, ironically, the most efficient thing Ben and I ever did together. There was no screaming over dishes or fighting for the TV. Our divorce was a cold, meticulous dismantling of a joint venture. Mediation felt like a business negotiation where the failing company was our life. We sat across a table, flanked by lawyers, and divided assets with the clinical precision he loved. He got the townhouse. It suited his aesthetic. I took my savings, my retirement fund, and a lump sum buyout. I wanted no ongoing ties, no alimony framework. I wanted a clean, total severance. The only moment his composure cracked was over the Netflix account itself. His lawyer mentioned it as a trivial asset to be transferred or closed. Ben cleared his throat. I'll keep the subscription, he said, not looking at me. I've already retuned the algorithms. It's optimized for educational content. I almost laughed. Even in the ruins, he was optimizing. It's yours, I said. I've already started my own. I didn't tell him my new password was my list23. Some rebellions are private. I used the buyout money for two things. First, a small, sun-drenched apartment with hardwood floors that would show scratches and walls I could paint any color I wanted. Second, a 3-week solo trip to Italy, a place Ben had deemed over-touristed and logistically frustrating. Italy was chaos. Trains were late. I got lost constantly. I ate pasta at 10 p.m. I talked to strangers in broken Italian. I bought a garish, beautiful ceramic vase that would never fit a neutral palette. I felt alive in a way I hadn't in years, vibrantly, messily alive. When I returned, tanned and with my hair a windblown mess, I threw myself into my work with a new energy. The Anna brand, once carefully corporate, became bolder. I took on clients whose visions were chaotic and vibrant. My business grew, not in a steady, optimized line, but in joyful, unpredictable leaps. About a year after the divorce was final, I ran into an old mutual friend, David, at a coffee shop. He gave me an awkward hug. You look great, Anna, really different. Thanks, I said, sipping my dark roast. Ben's, well, he's Ben, David said, shifting uncomfortably. He's seeing someone, a data analyst, I think. They have a very synchronized shared calendar. I hear it's very efficient. I smiled, a genuine one. I'm happy for him. And I was. He had found his perfect component. The system was back online. David looked relieved. And you? Seeing anyone? I thought of Marco, the Italian sculptor I'd met in Florence who sent me long, rambling, poetic voice notes at odd hours. I thought of the casual dates I'd been on, some wonderful, some disastrous, all gloriously unpredictable. Nothing serious, I said. Just enjoying the clutter. Later that week, I was in my apartment, which was a happy explosion of my art, my books, and that Italian vase holding a bunch of wildflowers. I was about to watch a movie. A critically panned, silly romantic comedy with a 42% on Rotten Tomatoes. I'd put it on my list, just because the trailer made me smile. As I clicked play, my phone lit up with a notification. It was an email from Ben. My stomach tightened briefly, an old muscle memory of dread. I opened it. The subject line was, Household Matter Final. The email was pure Ben brief, bullet-pointed. He was selling the townhouse. There was one final box he'd found in the back of a storage closet during the move-out. It was labeled Anna Misk. He'd had it shipped to my office address. Please confirm receipt for my records, the email concluded. That was it. No, hope you're well. Just a logistical update and a request for a receipt confirmation. The final audit of our life together. I typed back a 2-word reply. Noted, thanks. I didn't confirm receipt. I didn't give him the closure of his record. It was a tiny, petty rebellion, and it felt fantastic. The box arrived the next day. I opened it in my office. Inside were relics of the woman I used to be. A stack of pre-marriage photos, a journal from college, a mix CD from the 2000s, a faded concert t-shirt. At the very bottom, wrapped in tissue paper, was the small, vibrant abstract painting from the street fair. The one he'd said clashed with the aesthetic. I hung it up right then in the middle of my office wall, not worrying about alignment or palette. I stood back and looked at it. It was chaotic. It was imperfect. It was mine. The movie on my TV played its silly, predictable meet-cute in the background. I made a fresh pot of bitter, smoky French roast, spilling a little grounds on the counter. I didn't clean them up immediately. I sat on my couch in my cluttered, sunlit apartment with my bad movie and my perfect coffee, and I felt a peace so profound it ached. It was the peace of finally being home, in a place, and in myself, where nothing and everything was optimized. Life didn't become a perfect, happy ever after montage. It became real. My business had slow months. The plumbing in my old apartment building failed, flooding my kitchen. I gained weight, then lost it, then stopped weighing myself altogether. I dated a funny teacher for 6 months before we realized we wanted different things and parted as friends. There were lonely Tuesday nights and moments of doubt, where the sterile, predictable quiet of my old life whispered a tempting lie. Wasn't it easier? But the crack that had started with a Netflix subscription had become a doorway. I had walked through it into a world of color and noise and my own unoptimized choices. I could never go back into that silent, white room. 2 years to the day after I walked out of the townhouse, I was scrolling through my own, gloriously cluttered Netflix profile. The algorithm, fed on my diet of cheesy horror movies, British baking shows, and documentaries about volcanoes, now served me bizarre, wonderful suggestions. I just finished a terrible, delightful movie about a singing competition for ghosts. My phone buzzed with a calendar notification I'd set for myself. It simply said, "Anniversary." I smiled. It wasn't a sad smile. It was acknowledging a marker, a before and after. To celebrate, I did something Ben would have found appallingly inefficient. I bought a single, expensive cupcake from the fancy bakery down the street and ate it for dinner while watching another movie in my pajamas. The next morning, I had a meeting with a new client, a woman starting a community art space for at-risk youth. Her vision was big, messy, and heartfelt, the exact opposite of the corporate branding I used to specialize in. I loved it. We were sketching ideas on a giant whiteboard in my office, bright markers scattered everywhere when my assistant buzzed in. "Anna, there's a delivery for you." "It's unusual." A young man carried in a large, flat, rectangular package wrapped in brown paper. It was addressed to me in a familiar, precise handwriting. "Ben's." My client raised an eyebrow. "Trouble?" "No," I said, my voice steady. "Just the past. Do you mind?" "Take your time," she said, turning to study our colorful brainstorm on the wall. I carefully cut the paper away. Inside was a beautiful, simple wooden picture frame. And within the frame was not a photo, but a printed, laminated page. It was a spreadsheet. My breath caught, but it wasn't a budget or an optimization plan. The columns were labeled. Things Anna likes, incomplete list. The rows were filled, not with numbers, but with words. In his methodical font, he had listed, dark roast coffee bitter, abstract art clashes with neutrals. Bad movies, RT score 60%. Spontaneous trips, logistically frustrating. Greasy Chinese food, low nutrient density. Leaving dishes in sink temporarily, wind chimes, auditory clutter. The list went on, over 50 items long. Some were profound, some petty. At the bottom, in a cell by itself, he had written, "I was wrong. Efficiency is not the point. The point was you. I am sorry." No return address, no request for a reply, just an apology filed in the only format he knew how to express it. A data set of the woman he had tried to erase. It was the most Ben-like gesture imaginable, and for the first time, I didn't feel anger or resentment looking at his handwriting. I felt a distant, quiet pity. He had finally seen the data, but he could only process it as a list in a frame. He could never live in the beautiful, chaotic reality it described. I showed it to my client. She read it, her eyes softening. "Wow, that's kind of heartbreaking in a robot kind of way. What will you do with it?" I looked at the frame, then at my vibrant, messy office, at the painting he'd returned hanging proudly on the wall. I walked to a high shelf, a place of honor but not daily focus, and I leaned the framed spreadsheet there, next to my Italian vase. It wasn't a centerpiece. It was an artifact. A receipt from a life I'd left, proof of a self I'd reclaimed. "I'll keep it," I said, "as a reminder." "Of him?" "No," I said, turning back to our whiteboard, picking up a bright purple marker. "Of me." That night, I made a new list. Not on a spreadsheet, but in the Notes app on my phone. I titled it, "Things I Am Discovering I Like." The first entry was, the sound of my own laugh too loud in a quiet restaurant. The second was, not having to explain why. I saved the note and opened Netflix. The ghost singing competition movie was in my continue watching row. I clicked on something else instead, a Danish drama with subtitles I'd have to read carefully. I didn't know if I'd like it. That was the point. I hit play, took a sip of my bitter, perfect coffee, and settled into the glorious, unoptimized uncertainty of my life. The story of my perfect marriage was over. But my story, in all its messy, inefficient, colorful glory, was just getting started.